What is up? Daniel here with the Virtual Robotics Studio, and we're about to start working on the top frame section of the robot. So this is where you'll drop the PVC coral piece in. We're going to have a box of polycarbonate, and then we have our motor that's going to attach to the whole long shaft of rollers and wheels. So we need a ton of parts. Let me just point out, I got zip ties. We're going to use these zip ties to assemble the top polycarbonate piece to the sides. That's going to use zip ties. These were from the gray tote. Everything else was in the black tote. So there's like the shaft, the hex shaft, half-inch hex shaft. We have some pulleys. There's another sim motor in there. We definitely need this giant bag with all of our plates. And then we borrowed a T-bracket from that when we were doing our drilling to help line stuff up. Wheels, bearings, shaft collars. There's hardware kit in there. This one, make sure you find, there's a little AndyMark bag that has a couple bolts and a key and a retaining clip. So this is just like what we did however many videos ago when we put together the transmissions. And this is the same things we use to mount the sim motors into the transmissions. We're going to use the same packet to attach stuff here. Also, we need our KB 25008 pieces. Those are the two longest pieces of aluminum that we have. And if you're going to use rivets, I'm going to definitely do some riveting. I've got a box of rivets. We need a grip range of somewhere around like a 3/16 of an inch, because we're going to go through an 1/8 and a 1/16. So if you find something that's around 0.1875 to 2.5 or so grip range, that's going to work for you. Usually you can get away with a little bit longer too. And then we need spacers to go in between the wheels. So there are 3D printed files that you can get and 3D print. I didn't have the exact files as you, so yours might look different, but it's going to be the same thing. All we care about is the length and that they fit onto this hex shaft. So it's going to work. If you don't have access to a 3D printer, you can also buy a lot of the companies sell hex spacers that are maybe 1/8 of an inch thick. You'll just need to buy a ton of those to stack in there. Or we've got a piece of 3/4 inch PVC pipe that we can also cut down to basically make our own version of that spacer. All right, we got way too much stuff on the table, so I'm going to move all this out of the way. We'll bring back just the stuff we need for the first step, but before we start building, another special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible. Also thanks to First and AndyMark for parts and support, and thanks to Team 302, Lake Orion High School, for hosting our studio. First things we need are the two giant plates. One of them says Send Cut Send on it. The other one says KitBot 2025. And we want to place those down on the table so that the writing is facing up. That's going to make sure we put our bearings in the right side. So there's also a bearing bag. This one is Rev, half-inch hex 2-pack. So we've got two of these bearings. And the bearings they're not going to fit in the bottom holes. That's for the sim motors, or one sim motor. The top holes, though, are going to be the right size for these bearings. And we're actually not going to use the sim motor hole on this side, but I think it's easier to just make them all the same before you engrave it than it is to have two different parts. So go ahead and push these bearings in. I think they should go in just by hand, just by kind of wiggling it back and forth. But if not, if that doesn't work and you do need to hit it with a hammer, you can do that. Just know that once you start hitting with the hammer, it can't go any deeper because the table's below it. So you're going to have to get a couple pieces of metal on either side so that when you're hitting it, it's up in the air. But this one feels nice and loose and is going to go in no problem for me. OK. Next step, we're going to take the one that says Send Cut Send and put that off on the side. We'll come back to this in a little bit. And we're going to attach our motor next. So find yourself another sim motor. This one, I think there was an extra one in the gray tote, but I got this one from the black tote. And this is the same as when we were doing it on the drive. There is a little tiny AndyMark bag. Has a sticker in it, but it has two bolts, and those are the bolts we need. There's also one of those retaining clips and a key in here. So I'm going to put the key and the retaining clip back in the bag so I don't lose them. We're not going to need those for a little bit. But these are the bolts that have that tan patch on them, just like we had in the drivetrain when we attached our sim motors. So if you take the sim motor, we're going to attach that on the not writing side. So the writing side, I'm going to have facing forward. The motor's then going to come through from the back and line up with those two holes. And remember, on the sim motor, there are two holes that are real holes and two holes that actually just have bolts that are holding the case together already blocking them. So line up the 2 real holes with the 2 holes on the plate down here. And then we can go ahead and get these bolts started. And then we can sort of take them all the way It's getting really close to hitting there. All right. So this is another case where the handled Allen wrench will probably save you a little bit of effort. I'm at the point now, I think this one's hitting a lot, so I'm just going to have to take it out and put it back in. All right, and it's about to get tight. You'll notice this can wiggle around a little bit. I think it's going to be fine no matter what when you finish tightening this. You can try to center the motor in the hole if you want, but there's not that much play, so I think it's going to be fine. And make sure those are all the way tight. All right, this plate is now done for the moment. We've got our motor in there. We're going to come back once a bunch of things are assembled. Then we'll put our pulley on here to drive the other timing belt that we are going to use to power the rollers. So we'll set this aside too. Next step, we're going to take these 2 3D printed pulleys. These are, they say Formlabs on them and printed on Fuse 1 Plus. And this time, we are going to add some inserts into them. So you can see there's this sort of, I don't know, pattern, almost like a gear shape pattern here. And we've got a bunch of these pieces that will match that pattern. And this is our way of converting the center of this to be a hex shape, which is what we're driving it on. But also, sometimes if you just have the hex shape in the pulley, and the pulley's made of plastic, and the hex shaft is made of metal, that can cause damage to the pulley. Maybe the pulley doesn't survive. But by putting these metal inserts inside, it's going to make the pulleys nice and strong, and they're going to last forever. So what you can do is we're going to take, I don't know, let's do the big pulley first. We're going to go ahead and line up this insert. And you have almost no chance of pushing that in by hand. So I'm going to use the mallet, and we're going to hammer this in. And try to hit the center, but if you ever see like this side is getting higher, if you ever see one side higher, try to hit on that side to level it out. And when this is done, it should be almost flat. I can just feel a little bit of it bumping up above. Make sure that's in all the way. Yep, you can just feel a little bit of it bumped up above the top surface. Then, we're going to do the same thing on the other side, but don't rush to hammer this in because there's a 50% chance that this is not lined up. If you look through the middle, you can see the hex-shaped holes. And right now, my hexes are not aligned. I have to rotate this one tooth over, and then the holes will line up. I think every other tooth is lined up, and every other tooth is not lined up. If you want to be sure that it's going to work right, if you get the actual shaft that we're going to attach this to, you can slide that in to the first pulley. And when you slide the other one down, that is a spot where it's going to line up. But watch what happens. If I take this out and I just rotate this one tooth over, it can't go through. It is now misaligned. So we want to make sure that it lines up. So if you can see it, then good. You can just line it up and hammer it. If not, you can get the shaft here to help you line it up. So this is a spot that it can be. So now we're going to go ahead and hit that till it's in and basically flat. Just a small amount raised up. All right, so this one's good. We're going to do the same thing now with the tiny pulley. First one's free. You can put that in however you want. And we're going to hammer that. Okay, that went in easily. And we're going to flip it over, and I'm going to check that hex to make sure the hex is lined up. And then I can go ahead and hammer that one in as well. Perfect. All right, our 2 pulleys are now prepped. We can set those off to the side. And our next step then is going to be to, let's grab both of these plates that we were using before. Okay, so we're going to grab the KB25008 pieces as well, because these are going to attach to our plates. So you've got these two plates with the bearings in them. And the way these are going to attach on the robot is, let's see, they are going to go this way, where I guess this is the front of the robot. That's always going to tip back. And then the back of the robot is going back this way. So if you take, let's take the one with the motor first. The writing is always going to be facing out on the outside edge because we want everybody to see it. And our KB25008 is going to attach onto that row of holes on here. It's going to attach on the side above the motor, so the side without the writing. And we have two different sides on this plate. One side has 6 holes. So this side has 6, and this side has 7 holes. So the side that has 7 holes is going to attach to this plate. And we're going to use, there is, in the hardware bag, there's a whole baggie full of nylock nuts for 1032s. Let's pour those out. There's also a bag full of a bunch of, these are 1.5-inch long 1032 button head bolts. So because it's a button head, it means we need a slightly different Allen wrench size. These are going to be a 1/8-inch Allen wrench instead. And we're going to do some of these holes probably with, well, we'll do all these holes with bolts. We'll do some of the other ones with rivets on the other side maybe. All right, so we're ready to go. We're going to line up the holes. So the very first hole on our KB25008 is going to line up with the very first hole underneath the K on KitBot of that plate. And we can slide this all the way through. And I'm going to just put another one in, go all the way to the other end of the plate. That should line up with another hole on that side and should be able to go through. And then we're going to also do one more bolt in the middle. You can kind of do as many bolts here as you want. 3 is probably enough, and either middle hole is going to be just fine. I went slightly farther forward with my hole. So we have those 3 lined up, and for me, they all lined up and they went in. And in fact, because we used that technique with the bracket to line everything up, I think we can get every hole if we really wanted to. So we don't need to for this piece, but just showing that they line up. Now, if yours don't line up, if you can maybe get a couple of them in and then it's starting to get real hard to line up, what you can do is finish bolting and add the nut to the ones that line up. And then if you have to run a drill bit through the box to get that next hole to line up, that's okay too. All right, so on the other side, now we're going to take the nuts here and get them started. And these bolts are a little bit longer probably than they needed to be. So we've got some extra screwing in to do, but that's okay. There we go. So I like to always make sure that I start them by hand, just because then I know that I'm not cross-threading it or anything. So we'll get the hex key on one side. That is the 1/8 hex key. And then a 3/8 wrench on the other side. And I'm lucky this wrench has a ratchet in it. If you have the sockets, the 3/8 sockets, you can use that here as well. And we're going to just go ahead and tighten this one down. Now, one of the things you have to watch out for, it's still not quite tight, but as I start tightening this, once it gets tight on the box, if I keep tightening after that point, like I can feel it right there, it's starting to get tight. So I'm going to just give it a little bit more. That seems good. If I keep going, I'm going to actually dent the box and crush the box in. So I can keep tightening this, and I'll get a very big divot there. You don't want that. So as soon as it starts, you feel it hit the box, give it an extra, I don't know, quarter of a turn, maybe a little bit less, and then that's it. Just stop. That's a good spot. Now, if you do over-tighten it and your box does start to crush, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just stop. You're not going to have any problems because of that. technically, we put a dent in the box. That's going to make the box a little bit weaker. But this is more than strong enough that even with a dent in it, it's going to be OK. So that's all the way. I'm going to give it that extra little quarter of a turn, and we'll stop there. And then let's do the last one. Okay, and I can feel that that's hitting the wall, so we'll give it now that extra quarter of a turn, and we're good. And actually, that one, I went slightly too far, and it's bent in a tiny bit. But we're going to be OK. All right, this is now done. Set this one off to the side. And I like to kind of set it off to the side in a place where I can picture what's going on. So like this is one side of the robot. Then the other piece here is going to be the other side of the robot. So we need to turn this so the writing is facing out. And we have the circled holes on this piece. So this is one of the pre-drilled ones. So we've got the extra holes. But I can go ahead and line those holes up. And it is the side with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 circles. And that's going to line up this way. And then that's going to be our main support, the floor of this top structure. All right, so let's go ahead and put a bolt in the first hole. And the last hole. And then a third one. I'll do, again, the second from the front. But any of the three will work. And actually, if you're choosing to use rivets, you can rivet this as well. So maybe I'll do that. Instead of the bolts on this side, I'll show you what it looks like if we're riveting it instead. And I think some of the extra holes, it's nice to put some extra rivets in. So bolts are a little bit stronger than rivets. So if you're doing rivets, you can kind of make use of the extra holes there. So we'll go ahead and do some rivets instead. I still like to get a few of them lined up just to make sure we are going nice and flat the direction we want to go here. So that looks pretty good. So we'll go ahead and rivet that one in. And this one. And because rivets are so fast and light, again, you can use the bolts. It's fine. This robot is plenty underweight, so you're not going to have weight issues. But rivets are lighter than bolts, so that is something that may come into play later on if you start adding more systems to your robot. But also, especially if you have like a pneumatic or an electric riveting tool, it's just way faster than tightening the bolts in. So we'll just go ahead and do all of the open holes. OK. Our next step then is to take these two pieces and connect them together. And we're going to connect them together by adding a floor piece in here out of our plastic. So let's grab that. That's going to be your biggest piece of plastic, KB 25010. And this is going to basically sit in between here like this. And that's going to be the floor. This will actually be tipped up a little bit, right, when it's attached to the robot. So that'll be the floor that our PVC coral pipe can slide down. OK, really quickly, before we start putting this into our assembly here, let's peel off the backing stuff. There we go. And we will lose our label that says this is KB 2510, but that's OK. And for this piece, if you remember, there were holes in the part drawing for this. And I said, we're not going to drill those holes. If you drilled those holes and everything lines up, you're good to just go ahead and start bolting it in. But I think you can see how easy it is to see where the holes are through this. So we're just going to be able to put our drill exactly wherever our holes ended up and drill through. So if you were very precise with your drilling on the aluminum, or if you bought the pre-drilled version, those holes are going to be great. And if you're very precise with drilling the holes on this, then the holes will all line up no problem. But if some mistakes are made, or some people with a little bit less experience are drilling those holes, it's easy for them to not all line up. And that's why I said wait, because we can easily see and make sure all the holes line up here. We're going to grab some clamps for this so we can help hold it all together. I don't know how many we need. And our goal too, when this is all together, when we have this all attached together, we want the width between our two rails, our two KB 2508s. We want that gap to be 18 inches. So from here to here should be 18 inches, which means if this piece is cut to exactly 18, which is what we tried to do, then having it flat and flush and touching is going to be OK. If it's a little bit short, we might shift one of these pieces out a little bit so there's a small gap in between here when we go to attach it. If it's way too short, you might have to make a new one. It can only be, I mean, you still need enough material around the holes. And if it's way too long, you might have to go and make another cut or file it down. It can be over 18 by a little bit, and still everything is going to work out fine. The alignment for this piece that we care about is we're going to eventually have a roller going across here, and that's where we're going to spit out our PVC pipe, the coral piece, which means the distance from here to the front edge of this plastic will dictate sort of the trajectory that that piece launches out. So we care how the front is lined up. The back is much less important. If it sticks out in the back a little bit or is a little bit short in the back, it's not going to make as much of a difference. So I'm going to basically line this up so it's flat with the end of the box, with the end of the aluminum box on both sides. And really, we can clamp everything together, but you could do one side at a time. And then I'm going to come around and we're going to go ahead and throw a clamp onto here, preferably in a way that will let us still drill. So that's why I'm going to do it the slow way, where the screw is a little bit harder to access. And just before I tighten that up the rest of the way, I'm going to make sure that's flat. You can also use a square or another piece of metal just as a wall to feel, where that point is. So we can use that, hold it against the aluminum, slide the plastic forward, and now we know everything is lined up. So we'll go ahead and tighten that down. I'm also being flat on the inside of this plate for this one. So we're going to start right against the edge of this plate. And then we'll measure it. And if we're off by too much, we'll make an adjustment. OK, then let's go all the way to the back here. And again, I'm just going to keep it level. So I can rotate this plate, but I'm just going to keep it flat on the edge of the plate. And then throw another clamp on over here. Okay, stay nice and flat. There we go. That seems good. And we don't really want it sticking out too much because we will have stuff that attaches on the outside here. So don't have it hanging over if you can help it. All right, that looks good. Then we're going to come up to the front and do the front again. Maybe I'll use this quick one this time. So the other side here on the front, I'm going to start out by lining that up flat. We can still use the square here to push in to make sure it is flat. And I can squeeze down on that to hold it in place. And I can do the same thing kind of on the side here. Pull it out until it's nice and flat on the side as well. And then we can clamp it back here. Okay, and you can sort of feel with your fingers too if it's nice and smooth on the sides. But let's go ahead and grab a tape measure now. And let's see if we are 18 inches. So if I measure kind of up here at the front, that's really, really close to 18. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And then down here in the back, that is also really, really close to 18. So I'm good with the way this is clamped up. I might even add another clamp towards the middle here, just because it's such a long piece. This way, it's very supported. And you could also maybe move the clamp as you're drilling, but we're drilling through plastic, and plastic generally drills pretty easily. Okay, so if yours is not 18 inches right now, if you measure it and it's 17 and 7/8 inches, you're an 1/8 inch short. What you can do is take off the clamps and here where the plate is, where the two plates are, instead of attaching it so it's flat on that plate, we can try to add a 1/16 of space here and a 1/16 of space here. And then that would be the 1/8 gap. So the outside of our rollers would still be at exactly 18, and the outside of our frame pieces would be at exactly 18. But we would have a small gap on the sides here where the plastic isn't right to the very edge, but that's okay if that's the case because nothing is going to touch there anyway. So it's fine as long as you have enough room to drill the holes and have them attach. Okay, but we are in good shape to go ahead and start drilling these holes. So let me grab a drill. And this is going to be a number 7 drill bit again. We talked about that a bit in the open, but we've been doing number 7 drill bits for all of these steps. That's a good size. So we'll put that into the drill. And because this is soft plastic, you really don't even need to have a snap punch to help guide you. All you need to do is get close to the hole. So what I'm going to do is pick one of these holes. I'll pick, let's say this one here. We'll start at this one because I can reach it easily. And if you just do your best to line the drill up on that hole, you can kind of see right through to it. When you start drilling, even if you're off to the side a little bit, once you hit the metal, it's going to kind of pull it over and line everything up. And we can kind of prove that because a bolt will drop perfectly through the whole thing. All right, and we can attach this with bolts or rivets, so I'll do a handful of both. We'll do a bolt here. And we do kind of want to attach them as we go. We could drill all the holes first, but by attaching them as we go, it's just going to add extra support to hold everything together. And that it's going to sort of be like a new clamp. We're adding a new clamp here. And remember, when we're tightening this, it's going to get to the point where it's tight. And then you can do a little bit more, but if you keep going, you will crush the box. So we'll stop there. All right. Then we'll do the hole, maybe we'll do the hole on the other side of that piece, of that clamp. And just line it up as best you can and drill. And it's going to find the hole. And I'll go ahead and rivet this one. All right. So this clamp isn't really doing anything because we're fastened on either side of it, so we can move that. And kind of as we keep going, we're going to just keep doing the same thing. Move up to this hole up here, line it up. Go ahead and drill it. And maybe I'll alternate. I'll do bolt, rivet on the side. But as we kind of go through this, again, we talked about rivets being fast, bolts being a little bit stronger. You do get all the bolts you need in the kit of parts. So if you don't have any rivets on hand and you don't want to spend the extra money on them, then just go ahead and use bolts everywhere. But if you have rivets and you have a riveter and you like using it, then use rivets everywhere. All right, this one, we're going to be drilling on a slight angle here. I can't quite go straight because the plate's in the way. But because we're only drilling through a tiny bit of plastic, that's okay. I'm going to get it as close as I can and slowly drill in. And that hole is a little bit crooked, but it's still lining up with the other holes. And because we're 0.201 with that number 7 drill bit, it's going to have more than enough play for the piece to drop in with no issues whatsoever. All right, let's go ahead and tighten that one down. And we can take this front clamp off, which will give me a little bit more room to work now because that bolt is already in there. That hole is drilled. So this is a situation where if you have a ball end on your Allen wrench, it's nice because if I'm straight up, I'm sort of banging into this every single time. But the end of this isn't straight. It has what's called a ball end on it. And what that lets me do is I can be on a little bit of an angle and it still goes into the hole and lets me screw it in. Or alternatively, my wrenches do have a socket or a ratchet on one side. And so if I put the ratchet in, then I can just use the short side back and forth. You can also do the same thing with a socket, as we talked about in one of the earlier steps. but it definitely saves some time. All right, and that is tight. We'll go a little bit more. Okay, now there we go. That feels tight. We'll stop there. All right, we've got 2 more holes on this one to do. So here towards the back, we're going to go ahead and drill the next one. Okay, and you do want to be a little careful here. I'm drilling above the table, and I'm only going through the top wall, but there is another hole there, and it is possible that you'll accidentally drill through everything and pop through and hit stuff. So you can always take the hole that you're drilling off the edge of the table, or you can put something underneath it. Get some scrap wood or anything underneath it to protect your table. All right, we're going to do another bolt because that's what we're doing. We're alternating. This one's nice because nothing's in the way. All right, and we're good. All right, last hole on the very end here. Go ahead and line up to drill that. Cool, and we'll rivet this one. All right, and now we got to do the same thing on the other side. So I guess we'll start all the way up at the very front. We'll do the first hole, and then we'll work our way back. Let's see, we'll rotate it a little bit. I can also take that clamp off the back here, which will let me sit that down on the table nicer. There we go. All right, first hole all the way at the front. Line it up. This is the one that we know we're going to have to drill a little bit on an angle for. That's okay. And if you drill one of these and the bolt doesn't go all the way through, then just go ahead and run the drill all the way through both holes. It's going to get slightly bigger, but it's going to still totally work fine. All right, let's drop our bolt in. And this clamp can come off. Give me some space to work here. All right, next hole. And on this one, we circled the holes. This is why it's nice that we circled the holes. If you didn't circle the holes, you can still measure. We can go back to those, to the drawings if necessary, but you can also measure it out. So the next hole should be at 7.5. So that's the one that we're going to line up to and drill. That one lifted up a little bit, and so there's some plastic in between here that I'm just gonna kind of pull up on this while I can and kind of drag it out of the way. That can happen if your clamps are maybe too far away, because there's room for this to lift up like that. So probably I should have put a clamp closer. And I've got these quick ones, so I probably should just do this right next to every hole as we go down the line. But it's not a big deal. You know, the plastic, even if it's in there, it's gonna squish pretty flat. All right, we are gonna rivet this. And then the next one we're gonna drill, and then we'll do a bolt on this one. Okay, and also you can deburr these holes. I've been kind of skipping it because it's plastic and you can get away with that. But really proper is to, go ahead and deburr them so it sits nice and flat. If it were metal, I would definitely be doing it, but the little burr on plastic just kind of gets crushed under the bolt. So usually you can get away with it. All right, we're doing the bolt now. Let's see, we can take this one off. And I can tell you from just doing this part, I am secretly looking forward to all the rivet holes because they're so much easier to attach. So if I were building this just for me, I would probably use rivets everywhere that I could use rivets. All right, we're tight there. We'll do the next one here. Like I said, it's best if I do a little, if I put the clamp, if I move the clamp with me so it can't lift up as easily. We'll drill this hole next. And this is a rivet hole. But of course, at this point, we've done the alternating too far. I can't stop the pattern or it's not going to look right. All right, I'll move the clamp over next to this one. This clamp can go away now. Let's drill the next hole. Okay, and we'll bolt it. Let's take the clamp off. Okay, that one's good. Last hole. And this one's a rivet. All right, looking good. We now have our floor attached completely. This, you might notice, there's a lot of flex here, but we're going to have another piece attaching down on the bottom to the other set of holes that are coming down there. So that's going to get a lot sturdier as we go. All right, let me take a second to clean up a little bit, and we'll get the pieces out, and we'll start on our next section. Okay, we grabbed the next pieces, got rid of some of the stuff we've been using in our garbage. But first, I'm going to mention my bearing fell out of the plate here. And if your bearing just keeps falling out, don't keep putting it back in, because eventually it's going to fall out when you're not paying attention. So just leave that on the side, and we'll put it in just before we need to use it. Okay, the next pieces we need, well, we're going to need KB 25011, and there are two of those. These are the sides of our kind of structure here. And then across the top is going to be KB 2512. From this side, it looks like 5215. Anyway, 2512 is going to go on the top. So we'll save 2512 for a little bit until we need it. But I'm going to peel off the plastic on our two 11s. There we go. Okay. Now, if you remember on these 11s, we have 4 holes across what is the top of them. They're going to sit this way, ultimately. So we have 4 holes across the top, and those are 1/4-inch holes. And then we have the one smaller hole in the corner, and that is our initial alignment hole. So we'll go ahead and do the first alignment hole with a bolt, and then I'm probably just going to do the other holes with a rivet when we get to that. So if you take one of these, on the outside, so on the side where it says kitbot or it says send cut send, we're going to do the same thing on both sides. There are 1, 2, 3 holes, and then there's another 5 at the end. I guess there's 6 at this end. The one hole right next to that plate, the kitbot plate or the send cut send plate, is where this bolt or this hole is going to line up. That's going to go straight through like that. And we'll go ahead and attach the nut, and we'll tighten this one down most of the way. This one is actually a little bit nice to do with a bolt because we can, well, you can also rotate the rivets, but we can sort of tighten this one up just the amount we want. And then we can come back and tighten it up the rest of the way later. Because right now, when I'm tightening this, the plate is in the right spot, but it could very well be rotated from where I actually want it to be. And so, okay, guess we definitely really want the ratchet here. Let's change what my invisible hand is doing. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this hole is lined up, but the plate, if it's crooked, is going to be a problem. So eventually, once this is attached, we're going to see where this plate lines up with regards to the aluminum box that's behind it. And then we're just going to make it parallel. So we're going to make sure that when we attach the other end, it's nice and parallel and flat. So I made that pretty tight. And the next thing I'm going to do then is I'm going to be checking on the side here, like is it sticking below the surface or is it nice and flat on the surface? And mine is maybe just the tiniest bit below the surface, but it's very close to flat. And that's just going to depend on how accurate you were when you drilled that hole. So then what I can do is on the other side, and I think if I get this a little bit off the table, it will work even better. I'm going to look to clamp it over here. And if I can get it so that it feels the same, so let me go ahead and set this clamp. It needs to be tightened a little. All right. If I set this clamp here, I can feel what it feels like here, and it should feel sort of consistent all the way along. Ideally, it's flat and completely even with the bottom of your box, but if your hole is off a little bit, then that is going to just affect it slightly. I think there's enough room, enough play at the top that we're going to generally be okay. But if you're well below the box, I mean, I'm talking about, I just feel a lip there. I would say it's less than a 16th inch below the box. It's just the difference between when we did this one and I run my finger along this, I kind of feel them flat with each other. And on this one, I just feel a tiny lip coming out. It's almost nothing. If yours is a lot more than that, then you're going to have to probably double check the height of these holes. And those holes should be, remember this hole is a 1/2 inch down, and those holes are 1/4 inch off the top. So if you measure from the box, those holes should be, well, let's see. If we measure from the bottom of the plastic, right, those were 5 3/4 because we were 1/4 inch from the top. And then from here, it should be 1 inch less than that. So this should be 4 3/4, and mine is just short of that. I am probably a 16th short right now of that spot. That's fine, but if your number is way, way less, then you might have to redo this hole. But again, as long as it feels like pretty lined up on the bottom here, you're going to be in good shape. All right, let's go ahead and drill our holes. I said I'll go ahead and rivet these two as we go. So again, it's just I can see where the hole is, so I'm just going to line it up and drill right in. And then we'll rivet it. Okay, and that clamp can come off now. And now we're on the back hole all the way back here. And I need this to be higher up in the air. So kind of rest it on the clamp there. Otherwise, my drill can't get to the hole. All right, so now we're going to line it up. Remember, there is a hole on the other side, so don't hold it right there. But you can hold it off to the side. And we'll go ahead and drill. Okay, and we'll do another rivet. Okay, and this was another spot where, the drawing said to do all 3 holes, and I said, let's just do the one for alignment. Up here on the front, we'll do the one for alignment, and then the other 2 we'll get in assembly if those holes are already drilled for you. Cool, just go ahead and bolt or rivet as you see fit. And remember, if your holes don't quite line up, if you pre-drilled those holes and they don't quite line up, just go ahead and run your drill through the holes again, and that should open it up. Do as little as you can to be able to get the bolt to go through. Okay, and then let me just make sure that front one, I left it maybe just a touch loose. Let me just check it and make sure it's tight. Oh, okay, yeah, it was tight. Cool. This side is good. Now we're going to rotate, and we're going to do the other side here. So same process. Let's go ahead and do a bolt in that one tiny hole on the bottom. And this, we don't know where this goes on this one anymore. Yeah, we do. OK. There's a half hole here. So this is going to go in the first hole from the plate if you're using the pre-drilled stuff. All right, let's go ahead and get that tightened in. Okay, this one I could spin all the way around because there's no motor shaft in the way, but I would have to lift the whole piece up. So I'm just going to do it this way. And we're good. Okay, then once again, we're going to look to clamp this based on however that first one was. So this one feels pretty much flat. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep it pretty much flat all the way along here. So we'll clamp one. See, I think we can clamp on the very end here because the hole is in a little bit. And then we'll clamp somewhere around there. And of course, I attached this box with my circles on the wrong side. So my circles are on this side. So I can see my circles here, here. And I can't see them on this side where we're going to drill. So we'll just kind of peek on the back and figure out where that hole is supposed to be. I think this clamp is on top of the hole that it's supposed to be, if I remember correctly. So we're going to move this one over just a little bit. I think it's going to be the last hole. Yeah, this one I think is going to be the last hole here. And then this one, the hole is right here. So I will move this over just a touch so you get a little closer. Cool. All right. And we can also use the tape measure just to double check. So we know from the front of this one to where that hole is should be 16.5. So our first hole should be 16.5. 16 is this hole, so this one right here is 16.5. Now I just have to not move my finger, that hole right in front of my finger. That hole right there. All right, let's line it up and drill in. And a rivet. Okay, and then the last one is the very last hole, but it is also supposed to be at 26.5, and that is 26. So the very last hole is, in fact, 26.5. All right, let's line it up. And one more rivet. All right, let's take these clamps off. And we know that one's 18. We can check the height of our holes, compare them. They are basically the same. Like I said, just a hair short of 5 1/4. Yeah, or 5 3/4, sorry. Okay, that looks good. And we're about the same on both sides. So the next step then is for us to take our last piece of plastic, well, not the last piece, but the last piece for this section, which is the 25-012. This is the top of our section here. And we can peel off this plastic. And this is going to sit right on top of both of these pieces. And the holes should line up, there we go, with the holes on the other piece. So you can see we have a hole on the top piece here and a hole right there. And they line up all the way down. And all we're going to do is run a zip tie through those holes to hold this ceiling on. And the good news is the ceiling is basically symmetrical. So the first hole from this side is 1 and I think it was 7/8 in, right? 1 and 5/8. 1 and 5/8 in from that edge, and this one was 1 and 5/8 in from that edge. So you might have some small differences based on the size that you actually cut the ceiling piece to, but essentially you can attach it this way, or you can attach it this way, or you can attach it this way. It's not going to matter. Everything is pretty close, and there's enough margin for error in terms of its alignment forward and backwards that we don't need to worry about it. So if you grab those zip ties, these again were in the gray tote, and grab a few of those. The one thing we have to watch out for is if you start the zip tie on the inside, the boxy head is going to be on the inside. That could catch stuff. That could stop stuff from being able to roll through from the back and then out the front. So we need to make sure that the zip tie head is on the outside of the entire structure. The other thing, if you haven't used zip ties before, there is a flat section. So basically one side of the zip tie all the way along is flat, and the other side has that bump that raised up with the head. So when you're using zip ties, you're always going to take the end and put it into the flat side. And if you put it into the flat side, then when you start pulling, you'll get these clicks where it ratchets it tighter and tighter and then doesn't loosen up. All right, let's do it on the build for real. So we have the hole here. And I think if you just find the right angle, you can go diagonally through both like that. And then we can just go ahead and tighten this down. So you can go that direction, or if you prefer, you can go this direction. And all that's going to do is change where the head ends up. And I don't think it matters. I don't know. We'll try this direction because that's the direction I'm going now. And we're just going to pull it tight onto the edge here. I think I like this direction slightly more, but I don't think it matters that much. All right, so we'll do the same thing again. Bring it up from the side and tighten it down. And I'm really trying to pull pretty tight here. I want to get it, snug for sure. All right. Once I did the first one this way, I have to do them all this way so that they match, of course. So pull that one tight. And keep going. Pretty good. And now we can jump over to the other side, and we're going to do the same thing. So we got the 4 holes on this side. Guess we came in from the diagonal here, from the bottom, so we'll keep doing that on this side too. And I am trying to line up the head of the zip tie so it's always right on that flat edge. I think you can get it to sit neater that way. It can get maybe a little bit tighter. It doesn't really matter. If it just ends up in some random spot, that's going to be okay. All right, last zip tie. And you can feel this is actually pretty sturdy. It's not going anywhere. I can carry the whole thing, by that roof, and those zip ties are holding it quite nicely. And there's not really any force that's going to be on it. What's going to happen, right, is we're going to drop one of those giant coral PVC pieces down here, on here, and it's just going to roll, kind of through the whole thing like that. So nothing is really hitting the roof. It's just if this is bouncing, we want to make sure that it can't escape. So that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and trim the zip tie ends. Now, if you have access to them, you should use a pair of flush cutters like this. If you don't and you have to use scissors or things like that, that's okay. But if you use just even diagonal cutters, which are more like this shape, even if I try to go in and cut it flat, there's usually just a little bit that's sticking out, just a little bit of zip tie that's left, and that is very sharp. I've definitely scratched myself on many of those. So the nice part is the flush cutters, the back of them is very, very flat. So I can go right up against the zip tie, and when I cut, it's completely flat. It's smooth. There's nothing there to poke you. So if you have flush cutters, or you can get flush cutters, these are pretty cheap. I think I got these for $8 or less. You can just go right up flat against the zip ties and trim them that way. If you're doing it with something else, you can, I've seen people file it to get the corners down a little bit. And you can, if you use like a lighter, you can melt the end of the plastic that's sticking out that's sharp. And when it melts a little bit, it'll sort of round off and not be sharp anymore. So you can do some of those things too. It will work though if you just cut it with whatever you have. All right. Cool. So this structure is now done. We have a couple of things left to do, and that is we have our motor up here in the front. We need to attach a pulley to the motor and a belt to drive our main shaft, and we have to build that main shaft with all the wheels, our main roller shaft up here. So once again, let me swap tools and parts so we're ready to do that top shaft, and we'll be back in a sec. We're back. We have one more piece that we might have to machine before we can do our final assembly. And if you got the 3D printed spacers and they're all printed, then you're good. If you bought individual spacers and they're all ready to go, then you're good. If you're going to cut your own, I'll give you an example of how to do that. We'll cut one, and then you should be able to do the other ones yourself. You can use either 3/4 PVC. I actually think 1/2-inch PVC will fit. You can use almost any PVC pipe as long as it fits on our 1/2-inch hex shaft. If it fits on that and this goes inside, you're good to go. And we need 6 total spacers. 4 of them are 2 inches long, and my 3D printed ones are just a shade under 2. And we need 2 more that are 2 3/8 inches long, so 2.375 or so. So I've got a full set printed, but we'll go ahead and make one. Well, maybe we'll make 2. We'll make one of each size. All right. The easiest way, I think, to mark the PVC pipe is once again with the Sharpie and the calipers. So we know we need a 2-inch piece, so I'm going to set my calipers to 2 inches and lock them in. All right, 2.0015. That'll be fine. And I can kind of see it's going to be about here where I need it to be. And I just kind of like definitely give myself a nice amount of space to draw a line. I probably don't need it to go all the way around. And what we can do now is just basically scribe the line. If I kind of hold my calipers in place like this, I can kind of just rotate the, I guess I want to be on this side. I can just sort of rotate the pipe and get a nice little scribed line there. I'm able to make it a little darker. It's definitely visible to me. So we have this line right at 2 inches from the edge. And we know we want to kind of keep that line. Okay, so we can cut this in a number of different ways. I think what I'll actually do too is while we're at it, let's flip the piece around. Remember, we can't mark pieces right next to each other because the blade takes some material off when we cut. But I have 2 ends, so I can mark 2 pieces at a time. So this one should be 2 3/8, so 2.375. And in my experience, it's slightly better if you're a little bit too small than a little bit too big. But on the same token, if you're a little bit too big, we can always cut it or grind it down again later. So we'll color another area in here. And then go ahead and we will scribe a line again. All right. That one looks pretty good. Okay, so we can see we've got 1 long spacer on this side, 1 short spacer on this side. After cutting them, then you could mark your next 2 and go again, and then you would need just 2 more 2-inch spacers after that. Okay, to cut this, hacksaw is okay, but if you're going to do a hacksaw, I would definitely cut it so it stays a little bit long, and then probably file, or if you have a grinder wheel, you could take it over to the grinder and take it down to the exact size. These need to be relatively accurate. So I would say overall, if you have access to anybody that can 3D print them, or you can have them 3D print them and send them to you, you should definitely do that. It's going to save you a lot of time, and the accuracy is kind of unmatched. But the other way we can cut this, you could do this on the chop saw like I was doing before, but you got to be very, very careful. If you use like one of the spinning saw blades like that, PVC can catch and sort of explode when you're cutting it that way. So I am not going to use my chop saw to cut it. If you have a jigsaw or one of the like saws that go up and down, back and forth, reciprocating saw, that works pretty well for this. That will not make it explode. Those move a little bit slower. Or, of course, we have our vertical bandsaw in the back there. So let's go ahead and take this back to our bandsaw, and we'll make our 2 cuts and then come back here and see how we did. By the bandsaw, we've got our marks. First thing we have to do is adjust the guard, because I think the last thing we cut was much smaller than our big pipe here. There we go. That looks good. And a couple things to know before you start cutting anything round on the bandsaw. It will try to rotate, so make sure you have a good hold, especially on this side where you have lots of extra material. Make sure you have a solid hold on that so it's not going to rotate. And then on this side, I'm just going to guide it in. If your piece is this long, it should be okay to hold on to this with your fingers. If you get much shorter, then you would want to use a push block to push the piece in. And we're just going to do our best to cut straight, and we want to come right up to the edge of that line. Let's give it a try. All right, I'll flip it over and we'll do the other side as well. Okay, we're gonna deburr these pieces and then we'll measure them and see how close they are to our desired lengths. All right, so we just ran the deburring tool on the inside, and you can actually run it on the outside as well if you want, or you could have kind of hit it with the file all the way around. But these are cleaned up. Let's see how long they are. So if I measure the short side of this one, it's just 2.02, and the long side is almost 2.03. So this is a little bit too long. This one is, let's see here, 2.4 and 2.4. So this one at least I cut straight, but is also a little bit long. It should be, remember, 2.375. So both of these are a little bit oversized, and like I said, I think if they're a little bit oversized, we could run into some problems. So what I could do is take the side that I cut and file it for a bit. This isn't enough to really go back and resaw. You could, if you had to, start all over. This one we can also file. Or, again, we'll go back. We'll use the grinder for this. All right, and we can just take a little bit off. This is basically filing it or sanding it just fast because it's a machine. So we'll turn this on. And I'm just going to do my best to keep the piece flat, square to the wheel. That's probably enough. And that is also probably pretty close. All right, let's measure it, see if we got there. Remember, you can always do more, so you can touch it up a little bit. And I guess I should just have taken the calipers over there with me, but, you know, that's okay. We'll see. This one is now 2.00. That is very close to 2. This one is now 2.3745. That is very close to 2 3/8. So these are completely good. I'll deburr them one more time since we just messed up the edge a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and bring everything back in, and we'll be ready to finally assemble that wheel and the motor and the pulley that is going to drive the whole thing. All right, let me go get those parts. All right, first, if your bearing fell out like mine did, let's go ahead and put that back in. Remember, push it in from the side that says KitBot 2025 or Send Cut Send, the side with writing on it. And the basic idea is this is going to run, I think I have some burrs on the end of this. Let me file this really quick. So it didn't feel like it was going into the bearing nicely. And if that happens for yours, you can just file the edge down. Okay, now let's try. That's better. All right, so that will run all the way through. And the goal is this piece is going to go all the way through like this. And we're going to have a bunch of these big squishy wheels. These are in the Thrifty Bot bag. And these are nice. These are like compliant wheels, I guess. They're flexible wheels. So that means when nothing is there, they can reach down and still grab. But when something is getting squeezed underneath them, they have some give. So things won't just lock up when we try to pass the big PVC pipe, the coral piece through. All right, so these are going to kind of be in here, and we're going to use our spacers to space them out. And then we'll be able to attach our belt and pulleys on the side with the motor. So let's go ahead and slide this back out. So we're just going to be through one bearing right now. And we're going to slowly build this as we go. So the first thing that has to go on is a long spacer, 2 3/8 of an inch. So I'll use the PVC pipe one. Then a wheel. Then a short spacer. Let's use the other PVC pipe one. And then another wheel. We just keep going. Then another short spacer. Now I'm into my 3D printed ones. Another wheel. Another short spacer, 2-inch spacer. Another wheel. Another spacer, 2-inch spacer. The last wheel. And then we need one more long spacer, 2 3/8 of an inch spacer. So we can slide that on. And usually you can have it sticking out just a little bit to be able to line it up with that other bearing. And then once that's lined up, we can push it through. And we want to have about the same amount on either side. Make it about centered. It doesn't really matter. As long as we have a little bit on this side, we're going to need a little bit more on the other side. And what you might have happening to you, it's happening to me over here, is this bearing is just very, very nearly falling out of this plate. We can kind of spin this around so you can see what's going on here. And it's like the stuff in the middle almost feels like too wide, like it's pushing that bearing out and making that bearing fall out. And it might be. This is one of the reasons why I said I think it works a little better if your pieces are slightly short. But the other thing to remember right now is that piece on the top is going to be flexing a lot based on, look how much gap I can create here when I flex the plates. So until we have this attached the rest of the way to the frame on the robot, we don't know for sure how good our spacing is. We may need to come in and take this pipe off or take one of the 3D printed spacers off or all of them and file them down a little bit just to make sure that it doesn't have the bearings falling out. But for right now, we're going to go with that. That's going to be kind of OK. And on this side, the side without the motor, we need to put something to stop the shaft from moving. And there is a Rev bag with one-piece shaft collar 1/2 inch. They look kind of like this. So you got a couple of those. These tighten. There's a bolt on the side that is a number 10 bolt. So our 5/32 Allen wrench or hex key is going to go in there. And essentially, when you tighten the bolt down, that middle is going to clamp down and lock onto the hex shaft. So there's a hex-shaped hole in here. So if we slide that on to our shaft from the outside, go all the way until you're touching that bearing. And then go ahead and tighten that bolt down until it is tight. Well, you'll feel it. And at this point, it can't move on the shaft. It's definitely locked onto the shaft. Now, if we do the same thing on the other side, right? If we have another shaft collar on this side, that's going to lock everything in between those two spots on the shaft, and the shaft should not be able to fall out anymore, pending the bearing issue, which, like I said, we will look at later. Now, on the other side, we have a bunch more stuff to work on here. So let me spin this around. And my bearing fell out again. That's OK. Like I said, we're going to worry about that later, and we have some fixes later if it keeps happening. In the bag that has all of the brackets, we have our big aluminum plates and stuff like that. There are 2 tiny hex spacers. So this is what I was talking about before, how you could buy these little ones. These are 1/8 thick. Obviously, if you bought 16 of them, that would be the same as our 2-inch spacer. So we're going to need 2 of those. There are actually 2 of those in the bag, so go ahead and find both now. We only need one for this side, but we're going to need one for the other side as well. And also, let's go ahead and open up our belt. So we have another timing belt here. This one is 130 tooth. HTD, again, it's 5 millimeter. And on this shaft here that's coming out, we're going to slide on one of those spacers. Okay, all the way until it's touching the bearing. And then, let me take the other bearing or spacer off here before I lose it. Then slide the big pulley on all the way. And then it's going to be a shaft collar on the outside. Okay, and I'm not going to tighten that shaft collar yet because I think it's going to help us get the belt on in a second. So let's go ahead and set up the rest of what we need on top of our motor down at the bottom. And that is, if you remember, we had that AndyMark bag. I said save these. We have a key and a retaining ring that were in there. So we need both of those. And then there's looks like a West Coast Products bag with an 8 millimeter key to 1/2 inch round hex adapter. So we need that piece as well. So we need a hex-shaped something to go in our other pulley, but our motor is a round hole, and that is a 5/16 round hole. So let me take all of these pieces over there. We're going to need a socket. Again, the 3/8 socket was pretty good for us earlier to be able to press this in. Okay, and down here on the bottom, if you remember, there is a spot for a key to go in, a keyway. So we're going to go ahead and push the little machine key into the slot down there. Or accidentally get it stuck to your thumb and pull it back out. That can happen too. All right. Then we're going to take the hex adapter. It has a keyway in it as well. So we're going to line those keyways up. If it's pushed down all the way, it should go. If it's not pushed down all the way, then let me try to push it down again. Nope, it's still sticking up too much. So I'm going to get a pair of pliers. And I'm going to squeeze that key down just to make sure it's all the way in. And you can also check before you do that, make sure the key is somewhere next to where the adapter is going to go, which actually it covers the entire keyway now that I think about it, so you kind of can't put it in a bad spot. Anywhere is a good spot. So I think I can squeeze this in, and I just felt it go. It just slid the rest of the way in. And I'm doing that gently. I don't want to get any burrs or marred edges so that this piece can still line up and slide on nicely. Okay, once that piece is on, then we are going to slide on another one of those hex spacers, 1/8 inch thick. Slide that all the way on. That's going to get us clearance for the bolt heads. And now, before we put our last pulley on, because if we put this pulley on, it's going to be almost impossible to make the belt fit on the top and on the bottom. Like maybe you can force it by rotating to get it on. But I think it's a little bit easier if we try to put the belt on as we go. So actually, this top shaft collar, I'm going to slide that off. And I'm going to put the belt on the top. And I'm going to slide that out to the kind of the edge of my shaft there. Then before I slide the pulley on the bottom here, of course, that made the spacer go off. So we'll put the spacer back on, or the adapter, and then the spacer. I find it works a lot better if I can get this on the belt and then slide both of them in together like that. That works way better for me. And that is, if you remember, essentially how we tried to put the wheels in earlier. We get the belt on both of the pulleys and then slide the shaft in afterwards. Okay, so now that this is in, we've got two more things to do. The first one is on the top. Now we can slide this shaft collar in until it's touching. I want everything to be nice and tight. Everything should be pushed in so it's touching each other. And then we can go ahead and tighten that shaft collar down. Okay, that's locked in. It's not going anywhere. Good. And then on the bottom, we need another one of those retaining rings that we used on the drivetrain. So recall on these retaining rings, there are the teeth in the middle. And we want the teeth in the middle to be facing away from the pulley when we put it on. Or again, sort of the rounded side is going to be facing in towards the pulley. And the side that sort of has a ridge around the very outside edge is going to be facing away. So I'm pointing it in so that the teeth are going to slide on a little bit easier. I'm going to use that 3/8 socket, which worked well for us last time. And we're just going to kind of wiggle this on until, there we go, until we get all the way to that pulley. And so now that pulley can't come off. It's held on by that retaining ring. The top one is held on by the bushing. And when we spin the belt, when the motor spins the belt, it's going to make all of our wheels go. And let's do one more test with this. So this is actually assembled. We are done with this assembly. It is ready now. Well, we got to build a couple other assemblies, then we can attach everything together on our robot. But to make sure this is working, this is supposed to pass through a coral piece. Let's test and see if that actually happens. So if we get a piece of coral, I don't remember the exact angle that this is going to be at, but it's going to be something like this. And we want to kind of flex these in a way that will make the bearings not fall out. So it's something like this is our angle. And you drop the coral in from the human player, it's going to roll down, and you can see how it gets caught on the wheels. But then the wheels, trying to push it out, we can control that based on how fast we spin the wheels. There's actually one more thing that I just noticed and forgot to tell us to do, is underneath the wheels here, the area where this is contacting the wheels, look at this. I don't know if you saw that. But there was a moment where where the PVC pipe is just sort of spinning instead of going in, especially if I help it just a little bit. It can kind of go into this spin mode. And it's doing that because the polycarbonate underneath here is just really, really slippery. And so we actually want something, we never want it to be inside our robot and trying to kick it out, but it's spinning in place. So we want to add something underneath those wheels that will add a little bit more grip, a little bit more friction. There are lots of things that you can use, but in the kit of parts, we were given a little roll of gaff tape. So this is gaff tape used usually to tape down wires, I guess. Gaff tape is good because it has kind of a good rough surface on the top. It's also very sticky, so once you get it stuck on, it's going to stay there. It's not going to come off. And the other cool thing about gaff tape, which doesn't help us too much in this situation, is it usually doesn't leave a residue. So when we put it on, if you have to peel it off and put another set on later in the season, which is likely, it won't, you don't have all the extra glue that's stuck on there to deal with. So it's really good tape for that. And like I said, yes, this tape, keep an eye on it. If it starts wearing out, I mean, especially if a bunch of these pipes are passing over it, that rough texture could get worn a little bit smooth, especially in the key areas where it really needs to exist to grip. So don't be afraid to replace it if that's the case. And there are other tapes you can find. You can try grip tapes. I would probably stick to a rubberized grip tape, not like a skating board where it's actually sandpaper, because there are rules against damaging game pieces. So anything that's rubberized or soft or just, obviously more gaff tape would work. Okay, so what we're going to do with this is we are going to put several strips of this going across the front. We're actually going to do 4 strips starting at the front and going back. And they don't need to overlap, but they can overlap a little bit. But essentially, we want to just go from edge to edge. So somewhere around here. And gaff tape also tears pretty nicely, so feel free to use scissors, but I don't think you need to. And what I'm going to try to do is just line it up right on the edge of my first piece here. And if you are going to miss inside of the edge, it's better to not hang over the edge, because anything hanging over the edge would be a little lip that would start to pull stuff up. So I actually just went just a hair inside of where the edge is. And when I tape this down, if it goes up the side a little bit like this, I'll rotate it so you can see my mistake. I'm just a little bit too long, so it's just riding up on the side. That's okay. We can also come in there with our utility knife or any knife and cut and peel off the excess. But I don't think it's going to hurt anything by being over there. All right, so that was 1 strip. Like I said, we're going to do 4 strips going through here. So let's see if I can tear this one closer to the correct length. That is the problem, though, since it's so sticky. If it does fold over and touch itself, all right, we saved it. Sometimes you can't save it. I don't know what that extra strand was. I didn't tear it quite right. All right, let's go ahead and put the second one down. So I'm basically just going to try to line it up right next to the first one and not leave any daylight. Okay, let me try to get that bump out of the middle of this. I don't think it's going to hurt much if it's not sitting perfectly flat, but we should try to get it nice. As we go down here. Oh no, and then we got the end stuck on itself again. All right. That is pretty good. Let's do the next piece. Like right about here. Okay, and it gets a little harder each time because that roof is in the way. But what are you going to do? And one more, so we go 4 deep. And I'm just kind of like trying to line up one side and get it started, and then line up the other side. And the last one, as you saw, overlapped a little bit. And like I said, that is not going to hurt anything if there's a little bit of overlap. The other thing too is any of the grip tape that is past kind of like the wheel is not as important, because like where this gets squished down, it's going to be right on the wheel. So now let's see, even helping it, even trying to help it spin like I was doing before, like I can't. It's just biting and pulling it in every time. So we can't even get a little bit of that spin. Even if I really try, it's grabbing. So this looks pretty good. Let's give it one more test. If we tip this back up, kind of to the angle that we would dump it out at here. And we can see how it goes if we run that wheel out. That looks pretty good. Again, even if it goes in on an angle, we can grab it and it will still spit it out. All right. This is our complete now top frame. We've got our roller done, our motor's attached, we're ready to go with this piece. So we have 2 more assemblies that we have to build, the front support and back support, which are going to attach to this to attach it to the rest of the robot. We're going to do that in the next video, but before we end this video, we've got to give another special thanks to Argosy for making this all possible, to First and AndyMark for parts and support, and to Team 302 Lake Orion High School for hosting our studio.